the human rights law didn't ban sex discrimination. It was only after these women from General Motors organized and fought to be able to make that change. So thanks to them, sex discrimination was outlawed in the Ontario Human Rights Code. So that got them immediately merged seniority lists. It helped them, it helped women in the entire province.
Welcome to Activists Make History. My name is Peggy Nash. I've been a union activist, a feminist advocate, and for nearly a decade, a member of Parliament in Canada's House of Commons. I know what it's like to start from scratch, against the odds, in building a community campaign or running for political office. Our lives are hugely affected by political decisions, but for the underrepresented in political life, Canadian politics can seem like a secret society designed to shut them out. I'm here with a special series from Perspectives, a Canadian journal of political economy and social democracy, to lift the curtain on these electoral mysteries and show the underdogs how we can do it. In Activists Make History, I talk to activists, experts, political leaders, and those like me who've been there and done that, to show you can make real progressive change in how Canadian democracy functions so that we can win a better world through elected office. In November 2025, Between the Lines Books published Women United, my latest book co-written with Julie White. It shares the stories of women's struggles for equality in the Canadian Auto Workers Union. On this episode of Activists Make History, you'll hear the recording of our Toronto book launch at TMU's Ted Rogers School of Management. Julie and I discussed the book and heard from Tricia Wilson, the Director of Equity and Racial Justice at Unifor. Unifor President Lana Payne and OFL President Laura Walton were scheduled to speak but had unforeseen obligations that prevented them from joining. Here is our full conversation recorded live on November 13th at TMU.
I am so thankful and privileged to be here today, standing in front of you, along with Peggy and Julie. Our national president, Lana Payne, was unavailable today. She's got a lot of things that she is fighting for within our union, and a lot of pushback that we're seeing coming from across the border. So she's busy, and she also has our National Executive Board with her this week that are doing that work. She has sent some remarks that I'm going to read for you. Good evening, Julie, Peggy, sisters, and friends. First and foremost, my heartfelt congratulations to Julie and Peggy on this remarkable occasion. A book like this can only be described in one way: a true labor of love. Thank you for this incredible and important historical account honoring the legacy, leadership, and strength of women in our union. It is so important that the stories of women, the good, the bad, the hopeful, the inspirational, are all told. We are a modern social union, largely because of the work of the women in our union on things that went beyond collective bargaining. Largely because women organized within our union and broke down barriers for the next generation of women activists and leaders, and they are still breaking them down. I'd love to be celebrating with you this evening, but the world has other plans. Today, in addition to dealing with the many challenges thrown in our way by Donald Trump, we also brought together our National Executive Board this week to discuss the current context of the economic trade war that is so damaging to the industrial base of our economy and how we continue to fight back strategically, smartly, and with our trade union principles. As many of you know, we are in the fight of our lives for jobs and, yes, for the kind of union we know this world needs. A fighting union, an organizing union, a modern social democratic union that never stops. We are the democracy that the world needs right now. And everywhere she looks, she sees a woman rising to the occasion. We've spent the last year on the front lines, fighting tirelessly to defend Canadian jobs, to protect our industries, and to ensure that workers are not sacrificed by politicians and corporations. It is a time like no other. And perhaps that is why this book is so needed now, at this powerful, pivotal moment. At a time when our movement is being tested and our solidarity is a lifeline, this book is both a testament and a rallying cry. It reminds us that progress has never been handed to us, but hard fought and hard won. And history shows that when the road is hard, it is so often the women of the labor movement who refuse to give up, who, no matter the challenge, step up, show up for each other, and who understand that building a strong union will always come first. My hope is this book inspires renewed courage and reminds us of the unstoppable force of trade union women. I so want to say that sexism is a thing of the past, but as we all know, that is not the case. And yet, the broken down barriers have led to wide open spaces, spaces filled with a new generation of leaders and activists. I look around our union today and I see we are building a union for everyone, with everyone. What I know is that it is the resiliency of trade union women that continues to uplift when we need uplifting the most. It is the spirit and hope that the union will always be the catalyst to organize for a better world, a world we know is possible, because a better world is indeed possible when we fight for it. In solidarity, Lana.
Wow, thanks to all of you for coming today. It's great to see you all here. I want to thank Dean Pang. Amy, you have been such a strong supporter of women's programs in the university and the Faculty of Arts. My colleague Tracy Rainey's here. We do the Women in the House course. So, and MP Chi Nguyen is here, and she's been a participant in our guest speaker in our program. So it's great to see TMU colleagues here. It's great to see the colleagues at CAW and Unifor. Many of you have come out today. Thank you. Some of you live quite far away and you made the trip in. We really, really appreciate it. And our former mayor has joined us, David Miller. Thank you, David, for being here. And feminist legend Judy Rebick is here. Judy, thank you. You had an amazing birthday party recently, by the way. Yeah, it was stellar. Well, we're none of us getting younger, eh? Anyway, so many friends and neighbors have come. I want to thank the Between the Lines folks. Oh, Claire, thank you for coming. Hi. I want to thank Between the Lines folks, Amanda and Sana. You have really been champions of this book, and thank you for all your work. And I know Julie joins me in especially wanting to thank Mary Newberry, our fabulous, fabulous editor, who took a bunch of interviews and stuff that was a little confused and helped turn it into a coherent book, we hope. And some of the women we interviewed are here. Thank you for that. And Jane, you also helped us with the editing, so thank you, and the pictures. So, okay, enough of the thank yous. So I'm supposed to say why we wrote this book, and then Julie is going to say how we wrote the book. So in 2022, at the Unifor convention, Lana Payne was elected president of the union after a hard-fought campaign, the first woman elected president in that very male-dominated union. And boy, was that a celebration. And we knew it was history in the making. And as we were kind of coming down after the celebration, we thought, It is history in the making, and who has captured that history? It hasn't been captured. There has been work done. Wendy Cuthbertson has done a wonderful book about women, about labor in the Second World War called Labor Goes to War. And Pam Sugiman has done terrific work about the women of Local 222, and I'll mention their work, but she has written about that. But I guess it occurred to us that generations of women had fought for space in the union. And finally, with Lana's election, this glass ceiling was broken, as Lana says, not entirely, but it was a big moment. And so a big crack. But where was all that history? Books written about the union were usually written about the men. And we felt that we had lived through an important period of second wave feminism in a major industrial union, and we wanted to record that history. And how did we do it? Julie, over to you.
Thanks, Peggy. I'd just like to also welcome everybody here. Some of our colleagues from the union are here, both men and women. And a lot of the history in this book, if you want to learn a little bit more, you can speak to the women that are here from our union, because we followed in their footsteps in many ways. Well, Women United is dedicated to the resilience of those women activists who have come before and those that will come after us. The value of our interviews took on new meaning when two of the women we spoke with passed away. Peggy and I want to pay a special tribute to former CAW local president Kathy Austin from an Ottawa local, the very first woman elected at a GM plant, or an Ottawa local, and Colette Husen, president of Local 240, who was later a national representative with the union and fought every minute of her life to ensure that pay equity was an important part of our bargaining agenda. Women United is dedicated to the contributions of women to the making of a union. So many of women's contributions to the union went unremarked upon or were often ignored. We have begun correcting that here tonight. This is not a CAW book or a Unifor book. This is an initiative of the authors, and we have been free to write as we wish, not to only applaud the union, but also to be critical. We limited our attention to the UAW, the CAW, to what we know and what we lived in our local unions, and later at the national level. We did not devote our time to the former CEP, Communications, Energy, and Paper Workers Union of Canada, another important story in Unifor's formation. The history is for the feminists in the union to record, and we hope they will do that as well. Women United was over 3 years in the making, and I can attest there's 304 pages in this book. Peggy and I, as she mentioned, started it after Lana was elected, and we thought it would be a little project that turned into a 3-year journey, but it was well worth writing, and we spent a lot of time doing research with the national office. I'd like to thank the women who gave their time to the book. What you have achieved is a rich labor history that until now has been celebrated or properly documented. Labor history is about regular people who just go to work every day to earn a living and who decide to step forward and lead. We hope those stories in Women United will spur others to rise to that challenge. There are so many women we could have interviewed, and we did close to 50 women interviews, women who made valuable contributions to our union, who were underrepresented or ignored, women in their local unions who could never break through those barriers they faced. In writing this book, we have only touched the surface, and it remains much more work to be done. We hope you enjoy reading Women United as much as we did writing it. Most importantly, this book is dedicated to the women of the union. The union made women strong, but women made the union so much stronger. This is their book. Peggy?
Now, some of you are from the labor movement and you know this, but some of you are not. So I'm just going to give you a bit of background that we researched some of it. And so I wish I had known this when I got active in the union. But of course, we know during the Second World War, women increased their presence in the workplace. And during the war effort, when women came into many different workplaces, but in industrial workplaces, there was an attempt to organize them, bring them into the union. And this was the Congress of Industrial Organizations, the CIO. And they tried to appeal to women during the war. But women said, well, we don't get equal pay. We don't have the same time because we're doing a double, triple workday. And we don't have representation in the union. So they fought within this context of the union trying to organize them to make changes in the union. And there were changes. By the end of the war, the United Auto Workers created structures like an annual women's conference and women's committees. And these were built into the constitution of the International Union. There were pioneers during the war years and in the post-war period. And as I said, historians like Wendy Cuthbertson and Pam Sugiman have documented these times. After the war, when the men came home, women were pressured to leave the paid workforce and go back into the home. Many did, some stayed. However, the memory of their role in the paid workforce stayed with these women, and it was also inspiring to their daughters. And the key union structures from this period, the end of the war, persisted. Now, there are some key moments in the union's post-war history, such as the Local 222, which is GM in Oshawa, the struggle of the Women's Committee, who fought against separate seniority lists for men and women. What that meant was the women could all get laid off before the men, even if they'd worked there longer than some of them. So this Women's Committee, and boy, there were some real pioneers on this Women's Committee. They fought, they joined with the women's movement, they marched on International Women's Day, and they corralled a newly elected member of provincial parliament, Cliff Pilkey, who had been the president of their local union. They joined with him eventually to change the law so that the human rights law didn't ban sex discrimination. It was only after these women from General Motors organized and fought to be able to make that change. So thanks to them, sex discrimination was outlawed in the Ontario Human Rights Code. So that got them immediately merged seniority lists. It helped them, it helped women in the entire province. And just one other point in history, there was a strike in 1978 at a plant where a group of 80 women in southwestern Ontario, in terrible, terrible working conditions. In 1978, they went on strike, took on their employer, the OPP, who came out in force in all kinds of riot gear in the middle of winter, throwing women in snowbanks. And it was owned by a provincial Conservative cabinet minister. So that's why all the riot police came out. And this became a major cause for the labor movement. Lots of locals came out in solidarity, but it was also a cause for the women's movement, who came out in force and helped bolster the picket lines. After 163 days on strike, they won the principle of union security for all workers in Ontario, which was a first. And that is such an important piece of history. And it did change how the labor movement saw women, that they really were integral to the labor movement, and that it was not just nice to organize them, but it was essential to organize them. But it was a decade after that, in 1989, the year of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the year of the internet. It was also the year of the Montreal Massacre. And that was an event that shocked us, but it put gender-based violence front and center in Canada. In our union in the CAW, we held one conference on violence against women. It was the Women's Committee who wanted to have that. And of course, we had this structure of a national women's conference. Thank you to the women who had fought for this in the Second World War. And we had this conference, which was a very emotional event. Women talked about the violence they faced at home, in the workplace, in the community. And it was so powerful, they wanted a second conference the next year on the same topic. But that year, the second year, would be on solutions. They would strategize for solutions. So they developed a long list of recommendations, proposals to change the union itself, and then changes that they would take to the bargaining table. And in 1991, the union, because of the momentum of these women's conferences and a lot of organizing by women, they adopted equity and requirements, employment equity, language on violence against women in the union, human rights training for local leadership, and spaces for women in the union, women's leadership training, which was so critical for women to have their own leadership training. And the guy said, of course, why do they need their own training courses? So that's a whole other story. We also had a list of bargaining goals, and 1993 was a big year for us. We bargained workplace employment equity, paid lost time for women facing violence at home or in the workplace, the right to refuse work for harassment, and a groundbreaking women's advocate program. And now I'm going to turn it over to Julie, who will talk about what we did with those programs.
So this is actually an excerpt from the book directly. That's all right, Peggy. That's no problem at all. A key recommendation of the 1991 Women's Conference was to create more union leadership opportunities for women and racialized workers, especially in male-dominated workplaces. It was difficult for women to rise in the union because their numbers were small at the time. But even where there were more women, it was usually the men who rose to leadership positions. The union needed to train more feminist women leaders to help them develop more confidence and to help union women to see themselves as leaders. Some men in the education department, surprise, surprise, were hostile to the concept of women-only education. They saw this work as not only undermining their expertise, but as they called it, dividing the working class. It seemed odd that the lack of women in leadership or in education programs never seemed divisive to them. They grumbled, but the women needed to find a way to get it done. The union needed a specialized program, one centered on women's experiences, where they would have the space and security to really say what was on their mind. The kind of program they envisioned was the opposite of the lecture-based abstract presentation that often passed for education in those early days. A new approach would cost money to develop, to hire someone who had the special skills and experience to write it. The union by the early 90s faced huge economic hurdles with plant closures and layoffs. The immediate defense of workers' jobs and income was by necessity the priority for the union. There was little ability or appetite to spend the union's resources to hire someone from outside to design a new education program for women. Under the NDP leadership in Ontario, there was a funding program to outreach to women and other underrepresented groups. The union got a small grant to develop a course. Lynn Brophy, a CAW member, was tasked with the job. It wasn't only that she had an MA in adult education, but she was a feminist as well and understood that learner-centered education, working women's experiences would be central to the course. Brophy worked with others in the field of adult education as well as women leaders and staff in the union. The course came together quickly and piloted it in 1992 at the union's Family Education Center. Brophy and Georgina Anderson, a leader from Local 27 in London, Ontario, my local, and a member of the Council Women's Committee co-instructed. The concrete reality of women's experiences in their planned or workplace was central to the program. It built on their discussion and ideas to encourage them to find social solutions, feminist solutions to common problems. It helped them develop confidence and the motivation to want to get elected in their local union. It encouraged them to see themselves as leaders and to see other women not as competitors, but as allies, so that if one got elected, she would push to open spaces for others. Guest speakers, elected women and staff were role models, and they encouraged the women to take their full place and get involved in the union. The union was an even more difficult place for Black and racialized women, with very few in leadership positions in the union. Black women like Ina Morris, Josephine E. Banks, and Georgina Anderson were 3 of the 12 leadership women who participated in the pilot of the Women's Activist course. The new course highlighted that more work was needed to reach out and support emerging Black and racialized activists in future programs. Brophy and Anderson were skilled at helping groups break the ice. As exercises encouraged participants to show more and more about their experience, they also began to open up about their strengths, their weaknesses as individuals, their challenges, and their goals. The course sparked emotional responses on occasions when women spoke of harassment, sexism, and gender-based violence they faced at home and at work. It was often the first time they felt safe to share their stories openly with a supportive and safe environment with women. They also talked through the need for improvement to social programs like childcare, affordable housing, and laws that protect women from violence at home, programs that would provide supports for women, unionized or not. They also knew the union needed better enforcement of the harassment policy and procedure in the workplace and in the union itself if they were serious about increasing women's participation in the future. A call for structural changes to open more positions for women's participation in the workplace, the local and the national level, were needed as well. After an emotional but exciting week, it became clear that women in our union had been waiting for this course to gain confidence, to share information, but most importantly, to build solidarity and sisterhood. It was the beginning of a culture shift in our union that helped women begin to look at themselves as future leaders in the union. The Women's Activist course was far from perfect, but was a model to build on for the future. The course was initially offered as a 2-week program to women in the workplace across the country. Then in 2001, the Women's Department began to track the participants who attended the Women's Activist program and found participants were overwhelmingly from the auto and manufacturing sector in the union. Healthcare, retail, and women working in the fishing sectors with large concentrations of women workers were missing from the program, often unable to participate due to the lack of funding within their workplace, or what we called our paid education leave at the time. The union was changing, and so must our programs. To support women in the new sectors in the union, the course was rewritten and divided into 2 1-week programs, the Women's Activists and the Women's in Leadership. This change brought about new opportunities for women in the new sectors of the union to gain access to our women's programs. The other unexpected change was how much richer the discussions became, where women from diverse workplaces learned from each other. Many of the issues were the same, but many were different, often resulting in new understandings of the challenges women face in the different sectors of the union. The new program helped women understand the complexities of our different work and in turn build strong sisterhood bonds that still exist today. In the years that followed, the Women's Department would oversee the expansion of several new 40-hour women's programs designed specifically for women. Women members, including the Women's Advocate Program, Women in Collective Bargaining, and Women in Power and Politics. And I make that sound like it was just a given. It was a lot of work by women in our union that demanded, and a lot of our rank and file women that demanded these programs. Helping more women become leaders in the union had been one of the many important recommendations for the union's annual Women's Conference. Women needed to see and learn from role models to understand what was possible. They needed mentors who could encourage them and give them guidance. The Women's Activist was that and much more. It drew women into the union and helped them become leaders, advocating for traditional trade union goals, but also for goals identified by working class women decades before. It would be transformational and would inspire future courses for Indigenous workers of color, as well as 2S LGBTQQ plus members. The union was learning to reach out to women members in a new and exciting way. Campaigns. An unexpected outcome of developing the women's program in our union was the powerful network it created among women activists across the country. Women we could call upon to protect and advance equality. These were passionate, determined activists who had come to understand the strength of their voice and the transformative power of their actions. When the minority conservative government tried to dismantle the long gun registry under Bill C-391, our activists were ready. When the abortion caravan rolled through cities and towns across the country, our activists were ready. United, determined, and fearless in defending a woman's right to choose. The women's department became more than just one woman, which was me. It became a movement. Through our annual women's conferences and programs, we built a powerful network of bold, unapologetic trade union feminists, women who stood strong, spoke out, and refused to back down. Together, we fought to protect and advance equality for all women, and in doing so, we created something lasting, a legacy of courage and solidarity for new generations of activists to carry forward. Thanks.
Sorry, it's a lot of reading. I'll try to read fast. So this is also a little excerpt from the book. The rise of second wave feminism was able to take advantage of structures built into the UAW from the war years. What helped make the labor movement women's program so successful in Canada was the ability of labor women to join with their sisters in the community to fight for change, whether in strike support, fighting for abortion rights, childcare, or against gender-based violence. They forged a relationship that made both groups stronger. And Judy has been at our women's conferences many times, right? And boy, always got a hell of a response there. When this growing movement conflicted with the impact of neoliberal economics in the lives of workers, especially in manufacturing, it could have stalled the progress being made on equity issues. Nevertheless, CAW activists and many in other unions pressed on and made progress. These initiatives shone a light on how entrenched the dominant cultural norms were in manufacturing in particular, but in female-dominated sectors as well. The tension between the traditional workplace and the feminist movement was real in the lives of women, racialized and gender diverse workers. They loved and appreciated the union. They called on the union to defend their rights, but still sometimes found the union leadership or culture pushing back or blocking their way. Perhaps not surprisingly, some women bought into the traditional culture and served to reinforce it. When a significant opportunity opened up to get behind an activist feminist leader, some women clung to the old ways. They failed to see that the world was changing. What's impressive, though, is the number of leaders from diverse groups who developed during this period before the creation of Unifor, when the two unions merged in 2013. The numbers of racialized and gender diverse women in the CAW were rising, and they were organizing. There was a new confidence and a space that the union had created going back to the war years, but it was stretched, expanded, and filled with a new generation of activists eager for change. Unifor would help to accelerate the inclusion of new and more diverse activists. Change can take a long time, and it doesn't happen on its own. The top leadership of the CAW had mostly been supportive when women and human rights activists pushed for policies and programs to foster equity and diversity. This is the last little bit. Women were frustrated by the lack of diversity in the very top leadership of the union. The women in this book tell stories that show that gains don't just happen, but are the product of organizing, struggle, courage, and leadership over many years. Each of the women we interviewed for this book showed leadership. Each struggled to make a difference. The men we interviewed are examples of allies who supported and assisted women and gender diverse activists in their efforts. Allies can be essential in making progress, but ultimately, the women activists pushed for and achieved change. Thank you. Tricia, back to you.
So I don't have an expert from the book because when it was sent to me and I opened the book, it was like reading history, learning where you came from, why you became an activist, why every day you show up and continue to fight. So talking about how the women's conferences started and remembering my first women's conference, being in a space with a center full of women thinking, how am I going to do this with 4 young people? And the support, that was the foundation that did it for me. It was the connection. It was all the women that were there for you, not from the auto sector that I came out of, my assembly plant, where I knew some women, but knowing that it went beyond that, that there was others out there that were going to support me on this long ride that got me to where I am today. So I was asked, what do I see the impact of this movement making today? It's when I talk to young people. We had a conference last year for those that are under 35 within Unifor, and just seeing the passion that they have for the union, what they want to do, things they want to fight for, things that I haven't even thought of that are not readily available on my phone. But they are social activists just trying to find a space in order to make change within their union and the lives for their future. It's that generation that I see that is going to make an impact for us to move forward. So I know that there's so many trailblazers in this room, so many that I know you all think that you're very, very seasoned, but there's so much that we are learning from you still to this day. So thank you, and keep sharing your stories, because the stories that I gather from all of you and the experience and the knowledge that I was able to rein in and still continue to get today, I'm able to share with those that I come in contact with. Our youth for the future, our young workers within our workplaces, our young people that are still in schools that are wondering, are unions still valuable? Yes, we are. You need a union because we continue to fight. When one door closes, we continue to find another door to go through. And that is the motto that got me to where I am today, because Lord knows if I stayed in that plant and they kept telling me, no, you can't go to collective bargaining because women's collective bargaining because you're not at the table, I would have given up. How am I going to get to the table unless I have the tools? So you had to keep trying. And I think it's that fight. It's that I can do it. No matter how many times you get a no, somebody's going to say yes, and someone's going to believe in you. And I think that's what got me. And I think that's what's going to get our future to where they need to be today. So thank you. So I think we have time for a few questions. So if there's anyone from the floor that would like to ask Julie and Peggy any questions about, or myself, any questions about the book. Right, Caroline, I think we have a mic.
Here you go.
Thank you. I don't think I know your stories, how you got involved in the union, what triggered that interest in that.
Yeah, we do tell our own stories in the book, but you make a good point, because Carolyn and I work together, right? And Laurel and I work together, Jane and I work together, but you don't necessarily know people's stories unless you ask them about it. It's you don't. Shannon and I work together. You don't necessarily share those on an everyday basis. I got active in our local airline local, and in occupational health and safety, and because I was a bit of a big mouth, and then they sent me to a training course, and I just took off like a rocket. It put health and safety into class politics, and I was up for that fight, and that got me going, and it's kind of lasted me till today. So anyway, that's the Coles notes.
I started at 3M when I was 19 years old, and we had a 12-week strike. So I really understood the power of the union after that, and just got involved in my local union, sitting on every committee and holding every position before I was elected as first woman president of my local union. It was a large local union in London, held a GM component in it. There was about 7,000 people. And I remember when I decided to run for the position, one of the guys at the plant kind of came up and sat next to me and said, geez, they'll never support a woman running for president of the local union. And I said, okay. And he said, well, why don't we do it this way? Why don't you be my right-hand man and I'll run for the position? And I said, no, I'm going to continue to run. So anyways, I ran and was elected. And from there, I was appointed to the National Executive Board. And then I had the privilege of working with Peggy at the union, at the CAW at the time, for the women's department, and other women in this room, and you know who you are. But at the time, I think also we were very isolated. As Peggy said, when we did these 50 interviews with women, there were stories. Hi, Irene. There were stories that we never heard because there wasn't very many of us. And the writing of this book I think was a real eye-opener for us as well. So that's kind of my story, part of it anyways.
I'm just going to add that, Irene, your story kind of shocked me because you're such a happy, friendly person. And Irene was one of the first women to go into Chrysler in Windsor, thousands and thousands of men. And boy, are you tough. The stuff you put up with, the crap you put up with, and you were determined as much as they gave you, you could give it right back. They could have it nice or they could have a hard time. And boy, I just, that story, your story in that workplace was, it was a real eye opener for me. So thank you for your leadership.
And I read stories in the book, so make sure you turn that page and find it. It's a great story. And that's only part of it. I see a hand back there.
Hi, thank you for this book. I think this book is very much needed, especially nowadays. Currently, there's a lot of unions that are supporting many working class across the city. One thing that is actually on top of my mind right now is City Hall staffers are not unionized. We're actually, not me, sorry, formerly, we were one of the lowest paying City Hall staffers at City Hall. And I think the struggle, we're actually currently at the Labor Board. We're hoping and helping to make sure that our voices are heard. But I think the struggle right now is the fact that it is all parties. It is all across the political spectrum, and there's a difficulty, one, with how quick the turnaround is. It's a revolving door at City Hall when it comes to staffers because of low wages, unfair treatment, and so many other forms of discrimination. And the struggle right now is connecting across party lines. Because when you're a City Hall staffer, it's technically nonpartisan. And we're struggling to make sure that we are crossing the aisle and talking to folks from different backgrounds and specifically different political spectrum. So what is your advice for young folks that are currently at City Hall struggling to fight and just want to make sure that we are right now the unemployment crisis is really high, and we want to make sure that our jobs are secure. So what is your advice to reaching across the political spectrum?
Sign a union card. We can get you an organizer, actually.
Oh, we're currently working with Amapsio.
Oh, okay.
So we're in the way, but right now the struggle is the city of Toronto is claiming that they are not our employers, and that yeah, and then other counselors. So it's all public online, so it's okay. They are currently litigating against us, saying that they're our employers. The city of Toronto is not our employer. But then now people are losing hope, and that's a struggle. We approached this early on this year, and now people are losing hope because it means that they're not getting the support that we need, and the labor board is understaffed, and we don't have the support. And so, well, I don't know. Well, what is your advice to keep the hope going?
Well, let me say, first of all, Giselle is a graduate of the Women in the House program that Tracy Rainey and I run. So, and, you know, you make a good point that the labor laws are not necessarily the worker's friend, right? They make it hard to join a union. It's not easy. And organizing political staff is difficult, but possible. We have former political staffers here that were in a union, but in one party. Cross-party, all I can say is you have the common issue of low pay and the turnover. And if you can build a cohesive group, and there are organizers here that, you know, it's a different union, but that's okay. They have lots of experience, and, you know, it's hard to bring people together and keep hope, but it's so possible. Like, I don't know if we brought her into the class you were in, Chiara Padavani, organizing tenants, and a long struggle, but finally they bargained collectively with corporate landlords and won, right? When it wasn't even legal to do it. So I think you can appeal on the concrete kind of bread and butter issues and have social get-togethers. You got to have fun. And I don't know, seeing Zoran Mandami get elected in New York, that gives me hope. So anything is possible. Amalia?
What's the most important thing that unions are doing now?
What a great question. Do you want to start, Julie, or you want? Well, they're fighting for people to have a better life. And when you are in the workplace, join a union because it will make your life a lot better. So yeah, join a union.
Hi, my name is Hawa. My question would be, I guess, what is it's not really a question, maybe it's a comment and then a question. We're seeing a spike in a difference in the kinds of issues that younger people find most critical and important. And those don't seem to match along, not just with union leadership, but alongside other union members. And I'm curious from the both of your perspectives, what you would say to people who are interested in an older method of organizing that unions are more traditionally used to, and while they're being asked to make public statements about social issues or public statements about foreign policy that maybe isn't the role of the union, but there are workers within the union that do feel like the union has a role to play. And Palestine is one, right? What we're seeing, well, that's one. There are many, but I'll maybe leave it there.
Well, I can only share from our past Constitution Convention is that we do have a process where locals can bring forward resolutions or recommendations where we can hear different voices on things that we would like for the union to take part, and we vote on it to see if that's something that the union wants to move forward with. So I believe one of the recommendations right now that we have is a resolution on migrant and international workers. And so we're doing a lot of campaign and starting that structure to do work in conjunction with some of our community partners on that.
You know, it's funny because it reminded me of a time quite a while back in the union when some of the leadership in our union felt that choice wasn't a union issue and that gender-based violence wasn't a union issue. You should be at the bargaining table worried about wages. Well, our members' lives don't start and stop at the workplace. They go into communities and they face those issues just like every other person in those communities. So it was a fight for women. I remember being at our CAW council and we had a resolution on support for choice. And it got pretty divisive among, this was a number of years ago. And I remember we were at council and Buzz said to Peggy, who was an assistant at the time, you've got to get women at the mic speaking about this because we're going to lose it at CAW. Jane and I'm sure Laura will remember this. We're going to lose it at CAW council. So we had a caucus meeting and we talked about it. And when we went back into the convention, the microphones were loaded with women telling their stories about backroom abortions, about their right to have control over their own body. So, a lot of times people think that those aren't union issues. Well, they are union issues. They're issues that our members face every day. So it's a matter of working and challenging and educating folks who feel that they're not issues. And you're always going to have those. It doesn't matter, you're always going to have those issues come to the forefront, but it's how we organize as women or whoever feels the importance of making sure that is a union issue. It's that's kind of reminded me of the issue of choice. And
I think also having that space, we had to fight to have the right to have a caucus of women at our council meeting, because it was initially overwhelmingly men, but more and more women got elected. And then we said, we want to have a caucus at lunchtime. And they said, why? And we said, well, women want to get together. They want to meet. And we want you to provide lunch. And you want lunch. But they did. And so having that structure, when an issue like abortion comes up, or gun control was another one that was extremely divisive. We've got rod and gun clubs in our locals. And, a lot of rural folks who hunt. And so it was a very divisive issue. But when you hear the stories of people's lives, I remember on the issue of violence, we had a man get up and talked about the abuse he faced as a child. Mm-hmm. And those speeches can be incredibly powerful. So the great thing about the union is these meetings are an opportunity to have people broaden their views on things. And I think at their last convention, they gave an award to a Palestinian journalist who talked about their work. Remember that, Tricia? Yeah. So it's an opportunity. There's no better, well, except maybe the university, but in my mind, there's no better learning opportunity than through the union, because there is a lot of sharing of stories.
Activists Make History is a special podcast series from Perspectives, a Canadian journal of political economy and social democracy, a publication and production of the Broadbent Institute. This show could not have been made possible without the generous contribution of Unifor, Canada's largest private sector union. If you'd like to hear more from Activists Make History, share and subscribe to Perspectives Journal on all major podcast platforms, as well as Press Progress's Sources podcast that digs deeper into the news stories you won't find in the major papers. The Perspectives Journal podcast and Sources are proud members of the Harbinger Media Network, Canada's progressive podcast community. Once again, I'm Peggy Nash, your host for Activists Make History and proud member of the Broadbent Institute's Board of Directors.